The key to the entire internet sits in a bank safe deposit box, more precisely in 7 boxes at different ends of the planet, and once every quarter, their holders gather in a single windowless room. Rules like that are not invented out of paranoia. They are invented around things that cannot be made again. You cannot print another copy. You cannot apologize if something goes wrong. What follows are 15 such objects. One of them is guarded so closely that nobody is willing to insure it, not because it is expensive, but because it would be pointless. Which object that is, I will tell you at the very end. You are on the Top Facts channel, and I wish you all a pleasant viewing. The blue stone that glows red. On the 8th of November 1958, a post office in New York accepted a parcel wrapped in brown paper. The postage came to $2.44. Another $142.85 went on insurance. Inside lay the Hope Diamond. The stone weighs 45.5 carats, and its color is a deep blue. The blue comes from boron, a rare impurity that found its way into the crystal back in the Earth's mantle. The jeweler Harry Winston sent it as a gift to the Smithsonian Institution by ordinary registered mail and explained the decision very simply. This was the safest way, and he had been sending stones around the world like that for many years. The parcel was carried to the Museum of Natural History by the postman James Todd. Over the following year, Todd had 2 road accidents, a head injury, and a house that burned down. That is where half of the talk about the curse comes from. The other half is older. The stone was bought in India in the 17th century. It came into the hands of Louis XIV and became part of the French crown jewels. In 1792, it was stolen, and for almost 20 years nothing was heard of it, and then it surfaced in London, already recut. Louis XVI and Marie Antoinette were executed. The society lady Evelyn Walsh McLean, who wore the diamond to receptions and hung it on her dog's collar, lost her son, her daughter, and her husband. Except that the Smithsonian Institution historian Richard Curran took this legend apart document by document. The curse was spun up by newspapermen of the early 20th century and by the jeweler Pierre Cartier, the very man who sold the stone to McLean. The legend sold better than the stone. Today, the diamond turns slowly in its own case of bulletproof glass, under cameras and an armed museum police force. And the strangest thing about it happens when the case is lit with ultraviolet light and the lamp is then switched off. For several seconds, the blue stone burns with a deep red light, like a cooling ember, then it goes out. The sheet that was raised from under the floor. On the 4th of July 2026, this sheet of parchment turned 250 years old. At the National Archives in Washington, the text was read aloud from the front steps, while the document itself stood 30 paces away in the hall known as the Rotunda for the Charters of Freedom. The Declaration of Independence is sealed inside a case of titanium and aluminium. Instead of air, there is argon inside, a gas that reacts with nothing. Oxygen slowly eats away at ink and parchment. Argon does nothing at all. Sensors monitor the temperature, the humidity, and the composition of the gas. The building is guarded by the archive's own federal police force, an agency with one single task. The underground vault is a story of its own. From 1952 onwards, every evening the documents traveled down into a vault of concrete and steel beneath the floor, and in the morning, a mechanism lifted them back into their cases. That mechanism was built by the same firm that built the gold vault at Fort Knox. The charters were lowered for the last time on the 4th of July 2001. After a 2-year restoration and new encasements, the nightly journeys stopped. The documents now stay in the hall permanently, and for the first century and a half they were handled like ordinary paper. The sheet was rolled into a tube, carried around in trunks, kept in cellars. In 1814 it was evacuated from the British, who were burning Washington. In December 1941, it was sent to that very same Fort Knox, where it lay next to the gold almost until the end of the war. The text can still be read today. The signatures, though, have faded unevenly. They were put down in different months and with different inks, and time has treated each name in its own way. The cylinder that lost weight. A piece of metal became lighter by roughly the weight of a single grain of salt, and because of that, the system of measurement for the whole planet had to be changed. We are talking about a cylinder of platinum and iridium, a little over 3 centimeters in both height and thickness. It was cast in London in 1889, and from then on, the kilogram meant exactly one thing, as much as this particular object weighs. The French call it Le Grand K, the Big K. It lies in the basement of the Pavillon de Breteuil in Sèvres, just outside Paris, under 3 glass bell jars nested one inside another. The safe opens with 3 keys at once, and different people hold them. 2 of the keys are in France, the third is not. The cylinder has been taken out only 3 times, in 1889, in 1948, and in 1989. Each time it was compared with the copies that had gone out to different countries back at the end of the 19th century, and each time the discrepancy turned out to be greater than before. By the end of the 1980s, the difference had reached roughly 50 micrograms. Which of them had actually changed, the prototype or the copies? Nobody could say. By definition, the prototype had always weighed exactly 1 kilogram, which meant that, formally speaking, everything else in the universe was what kept changing. Physicists winced at that logic for some 20 years. On the 20th of May 2019, the kilogram was redefined through the Planck constant, a quantity that neither gathers dust nor oxidizes. It is now reproduced on special balances in any good laboratory. The cylinder was not thrown out of the safe. It lies in the same place, under the same bell jars, behind the same 3 keys. It simply no longer means anything. The man who never steps beyond the fence. A priest climbs the steps of a small chapel in the Ethiopian city of Aksum and quietly calls out to the man inside. Beyond the fence, nobody is allowed. Not tourists, not locals, not even the head of the Aksum clergy. One monk lives inside. He is chosen for life. He does not go outside, and he appoints his own successor when he feels that his time is coming. The Ethiopian church holds that the chapel contains the Ark of the Covenant, the very chest of acacia wood overlaid with gold into which Moses placed the tablets of the law. According to tradition, the ark was brought to Aksum by Menelik, the son of King Solomon and the Queen of Sheba. The guardian burns incense before it and reads the Psalms. He is the only one permitted to see the object. The chapel in its present form was built under Emperor Haile Selassie in the middle of the 20th century. The building is the size of an ordinary house, and around it stands a high iron fence. The chapel's roof, incidentally, has been leaking for many years, and this was written about long before any of the wars. The account cannot be verified, and scholars take it calmly. The British specialist on Ethiopia, Edward Uhlendorf, entered the church with soldiers in 1941 and looked for himself. Half a century later, he said in a newspaper interview, "There is a wooden box there, and it is empty." According to Uhlendorf, boxes like that exist in every Ethiopian church. They are copies from the late Middle Ages. In November 2020, when war was underway in Tigray and troops had occupied the city, the townspeople gathered around the church. They were afraid that the relic would be taken away or would simply disappear. Hundreds of people died in Aksum at that time. What stands behind the fence is still known to exactly one man, and he will not tell anyone. The cloth that nobody can reproduce. In 1988, 3 independent laboratories arrived at one and the same answer. The linen dates from between 1260 and 1390. For believers, this was a blow. For skeptics, it was the final word. It did not turn out to be final. Opponents declared that the sample had been cut from a repaired edge rather than from the main body of the cloth, and the dispute has dragged on ever since. We are talking about the Shroud of Turin, a piece of linen more than 4 meters long on which the image of a man with the wounds of crucifixion shows through. The image is double, from the front and from the back. There is no pigment in the fibers. The cloth is not scorched, and the image itself lies only on the very topmost fibrils and does not penetrate inside. So far, nobody has managed to reproduce this by medieval means. The cloth belongs to the Vatican and lies in the Cathedral of St. John the Baptist in Turin, in a flat reliquary with armored glass filled with argon. Light is not let in at all. Twice the cloth came within a step of being destroyed. In 1532, a fire broke out in the sacristy, the silver casket melted, and holes and scorch marks were left on the cloth. They can still be seen today. The second fire was in 1997. The firefighter Mario Trematore smashed through several layers of bulletproof glass with a sledgehammer and pulled the reliquary out of the flames. After that, the entire storage system was rebuilt from scratch. The shroud is shown to the public roughly once a generation. It was last unfolded in 2015. In the Jubilee year of 2025, many expected another showing, but the original was never brought out. In Turin, they limited themselves to a digital version. The crown that somebody tried to flatten. In 1671, a man dressed as a clergyman came to the tower. Colonel Thomas Blood spent several weeks visiting the keeper of the jewel house, got to know his family, and one day asked to be shown the regalia up close. He then knocked the old man out, flattened the crown with a hammer so that it would fit into a bag, while his accomplice began sawing the scepter in half. They were caught on the way out. Charles II was so impressed by the sheer nerve of it that he pardoned Blood and granted him an allowance. There is still no coherent explanation for this. The British crown jewels are kept in the Tower, a fortress on the north bank of the Thames that is 900 years old. The collection holds around 140 objects and almost 23,500 stones. The imperial state crown contains 2,868 diamonds, 17 sapphires, and 269 pearls. Set in it is also the Black Prince's ruby, which is not a ruby at all but a red spinel, and which has belonged to the English monarchs since 1367. In the scepter sits the Cullinan 1, 530 carats, the largest colorless cut diamond in the world. Its younger brother, weighing 317 carats, is set into the crown. These are not museum exhibits but working equipment. On the 6th of May 2023, St. Edward's crown was placed on Charles III, and it had to be resized in advance. 3 weeks later, the jewel house reopened, already with a different display. The regalia are guarded by the garrison and by the yeoman warders, retired sergeants of the British Army whom everyone calls beef eaters. The doors are steel, the walls are designed to withstand a blast, and the hall closes in a matter of seconds. More than 2 million people a year come to look at all of this. If you are watching this far, please leave a like and write a comment. It really does help the channel. The briefcase that follows behind. Once a month, an officer comes to check that the President of the United States still has the card with the codes. Around the year 2000, he was told twice in a row that the President was busy, but that he had the card on him. When the time came to change the codes, it turned out that the card had been missing for several months. General Hugh Shelton, at the time the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, wrote about this in his memoirs. He called it a comedy of errors. The card was nicknamed the Biscuit, and without it, the briefcase is useless. The briefcase itself is a leather case weighing about 20 kilograms, officially the President's emergency satchel. It is carried by a military aide who never moves more than a few steps away from the President. The Oval Office, the aeroplane, the golf course, everywhere. There are 5 aides, one from each branch of the armed forces, and the selection process for them is tougher than for most posts in the White House. There is no button inside. Inside, there is a book with pre-calculated retaliatory strike options, a card for confirming the President's identity to the military, and instructions for the emergency alert of the country. The order itself goes out over the communication channels. The briefcase is the thing without which that order will not be accepted. There had been failures before. In March 1981, when Reagan was shot, doctors at the hospital cut the suit off the President, and the biscuit went off in a bag together with the blood-stained clothing. The Federal Bureau of Investigation had to search for the card afterwards. In April 1999, Clinton suddenly left a meeting in downtown Washington, and the aide with the 20-kilogram case spent half an hour chasing him on foot across the city. The satchel has followed the President every day since the 1960s. 20 kilograms of leather and paper that nobody may step away from, even at night. The recipe that sells itself. For 33 years, the recipe for Coca-Cola was not written down at all. John Pemberton invented the drink in 1886 and kept the formula in the heads of a few people. It was put on paper only in 1919 when Ernest Woodruff was buying the company and the bank needed collateral. The sheet was placed in the New York Bank, and in 1925 it was taken to Atlanta into the vault of the Trust Company of Georgia. There it lay for 86 years. On the 8th of December 2011, the box was moved to the World of Coca-Cola Museum. The head of the company, Muhtar Kent, placed it into the new vault in front of the cameras. Now the display with its round steel door works as an attraction. Lights, music, a story about how fearsomely this one sheet of paper is guarded. The paper itself, meanwhile, is visible to no one. The legends around the recipe are better known than the recipe. It is said that only 2 people know the formula, and that those 2 are forbidden to fly on the same flight. The company never denies stories like that. The real security story looks different and happened in 2006. A company secretary, Joya Williams, carried out confidential documents and samples of drinks that had not yet been released, and her accomplice wrote a letter to Pepsi offering to sell all of it to whoever would pay the most. Pepsi forwarded the letter to its competitor. What followed was a Federal Bureau of Investigation operation, a trial, and 8 years in prison. Specialists have long said that the composition of the drink can be approximately reconstructed in a laboratory, only it is not the composition that people are buying. The vault in Atlanta is guarding an advertising campaign, and it guards it the way a bank would. The stone in the silver frame. 1,050 frames over 7 hours of shooting and another 50 hours of processing. That is what it took to Saudi authority for the affairs of the two holy mosques to show the black stone for the first time in 2021 in such a way that every pore is visible. The resolution was 49,000 megapixels. Before that, the best pictures of Islam's principal relic had been taken hastily and through a crowd. The stone is set into the eastern corner of the Kaaba, at the center of the sacred mosque in Mecca. It is dark, reddish-brown, about 30 centimeters across, and it has long since stopped being a single stone. It is 8 fragments held together by a silver frame. According to tradition, the stone was sent down from heaven and was whiter than milk until it darkened from the sins of men. The Prophet Muhammad set it into the corner of the Kaaba with his own hands at the beginning of the 7th century. It marks the start of the Tawaf, the sevenfold circling of the Kaaba, the central rite of the Hajj. In 2025, 1,673,000 people performed the Hajj, and every one of them wanted to touch that corner. Guarding the mosque during the days of the Hajj is one of the largest annual operations on the planet. The stone has survived more than any display case. In 930, it was carried off from Mecca by the Karmatian sect, who kept it for more than 20 years. They returned it broken. The frame was made precisely so that the fragments would hold together. In theory, any pilgrim can touch it. In practice, it depends on your luck in the crowd. 2 addresses for the whole planet. There are exactly 2 addresses on Earth where the smallpox virus is permitted to exist. The first is the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention in Atlanta. The second is the Vector Research Center in the settlement of Koltsovo, near Novosibirsk. Everything else is to be destroyed. That is what is written in the resolutions of the World Health Organization. Smallpox was declared defeated in 1980. In the 20th century alone, it took around 300 million lives. The last natural case was recorded in Somalia in 1977, and the last person in the world to die of smallpox was Janet Parker, a photographer at the medical school in Birmingham. In 1978, the virus escaped from a laboratory that operated 1 floor below her room. The vials are kept in liquid nitrogen in laboratories of the highest containment level, where people work in pressure suits with their own air supply. According to the inventory examined during the debate on destroying the stocks, Atlanta holds 451 samples and Koltsovo 691. Once every 2 years, an international inspection arrives and checks everything down to the last latch. The most recent inspection in Koltsovo took place in November 2025, and the report has been published openly. And even so, the virus is sometimes found where it should not be. On the 1st of July 2014, an employee was clearing out an old refrigerator in a storage facility near Washington and came across 6 forgotten vials labeled variola. They had been put there at the beginning of the 1970s and lost track of. Analysis showed that the virus inside them was alive. On the 16th of September 2019, a gas cylinder exploded at Vector on the 5th floor of the laboratory building. The sanitary airlock was being renovated. Windows were blown out, a fire started, and a decorator suffered burns over almost half of his body. There were no dangerous materials in that building that day, and this was announced within the first few hours. The news went around the world anyway because of a single word in the center's name: boxes in the ice. Åsmund Åsdahl, who is responsible for the vault on behalf of the Nordic Genetic Resource Center, told journalists that he had hoped never to receive a request like that. The request came in September 2015. The International Center for Agricultural Research in the Dry Areas, whose seed bank stood outside Aleppo, asked for its seeds back. Its staff could no longer reach their own cold stores. The vault stands on Svalbard, 130 meters inside a mountain beneath the permafrost. Inside, the temperature is held at 18 degrees below zero. It is not a museum, and it is not the property of Norway. Every box belongs to the bank that sent it, and only that bank can open it. A safe deposit box for food. Back then in 2015, 128 boxes were taken out of the mountain, 38,000 samples. They were sown in Lebanon and in Morocco. A year and a half later, the first batch came back, already from a new harvest. In total, the Syrians took out 116,484 samples and returned almost all of them. In the entire history of the vault, seeds have genuinely been withdrawn only once, and that was the occasion. The mountain has let them down too. In the autumn of 2016, meltwater came into the entrance tunnel. The permafrost on Svalbard is falling faster than any of the calculations predicted. The water did not reach the seeds, but Norway spent around 100 million kroner on a new entrance and on drainage. By the summer of 2026, the mountain holds 1,401,285 samples from banks on every continent. Its capacity is 4.5 million. The door is open 2 or 3 times a year in batches. In February 2026, seeds arrived for the first time from Guatemala and Niger, and with them the first olive stones in the vault's history. More than anything, it resembles a postal service that only works in one direction. The star that was carried out through a window. Someone had left the window of a 4th-floor bathroom unlocked earlier in the day. On the night of the 29th of October 1964, 3 men climbed through it into the American Museum of Natural History. The leader was Jack Murphy, nicknamed Murph the Surf, a surfing champion and small-time crook from Miami. In the gem hall, they took their time. They did not smash the glass of the cases. They cut circles with a glass cutter, taped them over so that nothing would rattle, and lifted the pieces out with suction cups. When they reached the Star of India, it turned out that the batteries of the alarm had long since corroded. No bell rang. In all, they carried away 24 stones. The Star of India is a sapphire of 563 carats, the size of a large egg, a cloudy blue. Inside it are needle-shaped inclusions, because of which a 6-rayed star floats across its surface, visible from almost any angle. The stone was found in Sri Lanka, and it was given to the museum by the financier John Pierpont Morgan in 1900. They were all arrested within 2 days. The thieves had been boasting in the bars of Miami Beach. The sapphire was found in a locker at the Miami bus station. The DeLong ruby was bought back for $25,000, and the Eagle diamond was never found at all. It was almost certainly recut. After that night, museums all over the world rewrote their procedures. Today, the Star of India stands at the center of the Gem Hall, which reopened in June 2021, a separate alarm on every case, cameras from every side, a different kind of glass. Murphy himself served time for the theft, then went to prison again for murder. He got out, became a prison preacher, and died in 2020 at the age of 83. The stone does not care. It is 2 billion years old, and that night it did not get a single scratch. The face of the pharaoh, 10 kilograms and 230 grams of gold, with inlays of lapis lazuli, carnelian, and colored glass. Howard Carter's expedition found this mask in 1925, inside the smallest of 3 coffins nested one within another, resting directly on the shoulders of the mummy. Tutankhamun was about 18 years old. He died more than 3,300 years ago. For almost 100 years, the mask lay in the Cairo Museum on Tahrir Square. In October 2025, the hall was closed and the mask was moved under heavy guard to the pyramids of Giza. On the 1st of November, the Grand Egyptian Museum opened, and on the 4th, the public was let in, on the 103rd anniversary of the discovery of the tomb. For the first time, more than 5,000 objects from that tomb are gathered under one roof. The mask stands in its own case with climate control and armored glass, and the flow of visitors is arranged so that no crush can build up in front of the glass. Egypt has not let it leave the country since the 1970s and repeats this with every request. Nobody names a price. The gold, at today's prices, is worth a sum anyone can calculate, but insurers refuse to put a figure on the archaeological part. Just how fragile it all is became clear in Cairo in 2014. The beard was broken off the mask and glued back on with epoxy resin. A conservator then had to dissolve the glue and put the joint together again from scratch, and 8 museum employees were put on trial. The key that nobody holds in full. On the 12th of February 2020, the ceremony had to be canceled. The safe would not open. The lock had jammed. Nobody could get it open with their own hands, and everything had to wait for a technician with a drill. Inside the safe lay the device that signs the root zone of the internet. Now, in plain terms, when you type in the address of a website, your computer asks a directory service what number that site has. So that the answer cannot be swapped out along the way, the directory is signed, and the whole chain of trust converges on one master key. It is kept at 2 facilities in the United States, in California and in Virginia. No one person can get to it alone. The key lives inside a protected device, and the device is switched on with smart cards that lie in separate safes in the same room. The cards have been issued to representatives of the internet community from different countries. These people do not work for the organization responsible for the root addresses, and they travel to the ceremonies themselves at their own expense. Another 7 people around the world each keep one fragment of a backup key in bank safe deposit boxes. The backup can only be assembled by 5 of those 7 together. The ceremony itself resembles a rite, a fingerprint and a retina scan at the entrance, a shielded room, a logbook in which every action is written down by hand. All of it is filmed and published openly together with the record. The 16 60th such ceremony took place on the 11th of February 2026 in El Segundo, the 61st at the end of April in Virginia, and on the 11th of October 2026, the master key is being changed for the first time since 2018. The new one has already been on public display for more than a year, so that servers all over the world have time to memorize it. Anyone who does not manage it in time will simply find that websites stop opening, and the culprit will not be a burglar but a forgotten setting. The Mona Lisa, a painting the size of a large chopping board, 77 centimeters by 53. People stand in the queue, reach the barrier, and almost always say the same thing. Is that all? There are about 3 meters between the panel and the viewer, armored glass in between, and a sea of raised phones all around. There is more security around this piece of poplar than around some heads of state. The reason is written into its biography. In 1911, the Mona Lisa was simply taken off the wall. The Italian Vincenzo Peruggia, who worked at the Louvre, spent the night in a storage cupboard, took the painting out of its frame in the morning, and walked out through a service door. It was gone for 2 years. Pablo Picasso was questioned as a suspect, and the queues for the empty space on the wall were longer than the queues for the painting itself had been before. Peruggia was caught in Florence trying to sell the canvas, and in January 1914 it returned to Paris already world famous. After that, people tried to damage it again and again. In 1956, acid was thrown at the painting and the lower part of the panel was damaged. In the same year, a Bolivian threw a stone and knocked out a small piece of paint near the left elbow. That is when the glass appeared. In 2009, a ceramic mug flew at the glass. In 2022, a man in a wheelchair smeared cake across it. In 2024, 2 activists doused it with soup. On the 19th of October 2025, 4 men in builder's vests entered the Louvre. They raised a truck-mounted lift up to the balcony of the Apollo Gallery, forced a window, cut open the display cases, and rode away on scooters. 7 minutes, 8 items from the French crown jewels, 88 million euros, all of it 250 meters from the Mona Lisa. The jewels have still not been found. The director of the museum tendered her resignation, the resignation was not accepted, and security at the Louvre is being rebuilt as a matter of urgency. The painting itself is not insured by the French state. Not out of thrift, there is nothing to insure. It was painted by one man between 1503 and 1519 on a single panel of Italian poplar, and no copy will replace that panel. It was valued exactly once, in 1962, before a trip to the United States, $100 million, about $1 billion in today's money. No valuations like that have been made since, and none are planned. Write in the comments everything you think about the most heavily guarded objects on the planet, and subscribe to the Top Facts channel for collections of the most incredible facts and videos from all over the internet. Thank you all very much for watching, and right now go and watch our previous incredible episodes which have already appeared on your screen.